Hello, everyone. We would like to welcome you to our monthly webinar that we are offering. Today it's going to be produced and presented by Neil, who has been a lovely asset to our team. He is from Protocol for Life and Now Foods, and he has been great in educating both myself and our team members on his array of products, and it's just a complete and total wealth of knowledge. So we welcome you, Neil, and I am going to turn it over to you so that you can present on the nutritional support for brain and mood.
Thank you, Amanda, and thanks, Doreen and folks. Appreciate the opportunity. I'm Neil Levine. I'm a clinical nutritionist. I'm one of the folks that founded the American Nutrition Association, and I work with other organizations. I've actually been in the natural products industry since 1973, and I've been a clinical nutritionist. December will be my 30th anniversary of getting my certification. So I work with Protocol for Life Balance, which is part of the Now Health Group. NAHG is actually the largest independent family-owned business in the natural products industry. Protocol is our brand dedicated to healthcare professionals. And just a few slides about what's happening with the company recently. We recently received our ISO certification, which gives us an accreditation for our laboratories. It means we meet the International Standards Organization accreditation for laboratory standards and benchmarks. So our scope of testing includes a wide range of competences in chemical testing, as well as ISO certification for our microbiological testing. We do screen our raw materials for microcontamination, and we do assay our probiotics for correct genus, species, strain, and not having other things in there that don't belong there. So this is the standard worldwide that labs have to be accepted by official organizations such as governments. So this allows us to export worldwide. We are sold in many countries, and it allows us to have the same certification as any third party or contract lab, which means that we can test and we have exactly the same credentials as if you send this to a third party lab. And we also develop methods used by industry, and our latest one is detecting very low levels of pesticides in botanical materials. And that includes glyphosate, which is something of great concern to many consumers. And what's not generally known is that there's something called matrix interference in testing. And that means that fats, proteins, even pigments like carotenoids, or some of the components of standard botanical materials can interfere with detecting other chemicals, including pesticides. And so we actually developed methods of finding more of these pesticides at lower levels than have ever been found before. So for example, in hawthorn berries, there's somewhere close to 40 compounds that were not able to be identified with standard testing. And we've cut that number approximately in half by introducing more sensitive testing, so we can find pesticides at very low levels in these botanical or plant-based materials. And this is kind of a technical slide, but it also mentions ashwagandha and other herbs that are subject to this method. They're difficult to analyze, and we're expanding the capability of being able to find more chemicals, including pesticides. So just want to bring you up to date on some of the latest things that we're proud of, that our company is devoting resources to expanding quality testing and safety testing that is now available to other companies as well. We are not hoarding this knowledge. We're actually sharing it with other chemists. So without further ado, we're going to get into the topic here. And part one, I'm going to share some opinions from experts on what happens to the brain as we age. So the National Institute on Aging at National Institutes of Health says that we expect changes to the body, including the brain, as we age. Certain parts of the brain will shrink And that includes the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. These are areas important for learning, memory, planning, etc. We also expect changes in neurons and neurotransmitters to affect communication in the nervous system. And we expect reduced blood flow as arteries narrow and there's less growth of new capillaries, especially in the brain. So in some people, we're also going to find plaques and tangles develop around neurons. This is not Alzheimer's disease. This is one of the compounds that has a role potentially in Alzheimer's disease, but this is actually not a disease state. And part of the problem is we're seeing the free radical damage in the brain increase and the amount of inflammation in the brain increase. So this is all the changing brain and healthy aging from the National Institute on Aging. So many scientists do believe that major declines in mental abilities are not inevitable as we age. We used to think that the brain had all the cells and neurons needed at birth, and that was all we had. And whatever you had when you were born, those are the nerve cells you had. You weren't going to get any more. And we've recently found out that's not true. The brain is adaptive. The neurons can sometimes be regenerated. So there is hope that we can restore good brain function as we age. That's from the University of California, San Francisco Memory and Aging Center. And they mentioned other factors such as lifestyle, overall health, environment, genetics, all have roles in what happens to our brain as we age. So experts also have opinions on what nutrients we need as our brain ages. So for example, Alzheimer's.net talks about foods that may induce memory loss. And on the left of your screen, you see what they call the white foods, the processed breads, flours, rice, pasta, sugars that are considered a problem in terms of brain aging. On the upper right, you see the processed foods and meats. Notice it's not all foods. It's not all processed foods and meats. And even at the bottom right, margarine, microwave popcorn, and some beers contain nitrates or diacetyls. But you're not going to find that in organic or natural versions of these foods. So again, there's more processed foods with more chemicals or fewer nutrients that are of concern, but natural foods would be less so. And Harvard Medical School has some advice how we can boost our memory by eating right. In their Harvard Women's Health Watch, they talk about the diet-memory connection. And they noticed that women who ate the most saturated fat from food, such as red meat and butter, performed worse on tests of thinking and memory than women who eat less of those fats. And they point out the Mediterranean diet as an example of a good diet, a healthy diet that might promote brain health because it has fruits, vegetables, whole grains, fish, and olive oil, which can help maintain the health of blood vessels, and diets high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are typically found in fish oils and some other fats, linked to lower levels of beta amyloid proteins in the blood and better vascular health. The beta amyloid proteins in the blood are a potential problem as the brain ages that is linked to what we talked about a little bit earlier. And you notice fish being high in omega-3 fatty acids, it's not all animal products and animal fats that are a problem. It's more the saturated fats from animal sources. And just incidentally, moderate alcohol consumption can raise levels of the HDL cholesterol, the so-called good cholesterol or healthy cholesterol, and also improves insulin sensitivity. Now, when they're talking about moderate alcohol consumption, they're talking about a maximum of 1 drink a day for women and 2 drinks a day for men. And besides diet, they have some other recommendations from Harvard Medical. controlling cholesterol, blood sugar, and blood pressure with diet, exercise, and if needed, medications. Quitting smoking, exercising, and keeping weight within a healthy range. Now, body mass index is sometimes misleading. If someone has a lot of muscle, it could actually show a false obesity, but in general, it's a useful tool. So back to Alzheimer's.net, besides telling us about foods that we should not consume for brain health, here are some foods they recommend for seniors and everybody else. And this list is actually fairly common with other sources. I'll show you a few others in a minute. So leafy green vegetables, salmon and other cold water fish, a source of omega-3 again. Berries and dark skin fruits, that's a fairly common recommendation. Coffee, chocolate, sometimes green tea are recommended. Extra virgin olive oil and other healthy oils. Cold pressed virgin coconut oil. And we'll talk about coconut oil in a little bit, but coconut oil has some fatty acids that are very useful for brain health. WebMD has their own list, and you'll see, again, some overlap here. You'll see the blueberries, the salmon and other fish, the nuts and seeds, and it's because of the fat content. Raw or roasted doesn't really affect that. Avocados for healthy blood flow, whole grains for healthy blood flow, beans to help maintain good glucose tolerance, pomegranates, another fruit, dark chocolate, and here's the tea again. And we see a similar thing from the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC Good Food, whole grains, oily fish, blueberries, here's tomatoes, something a little different. They suggest B6, B12, and folic acid actually taking foods or supplements that are high in these three B vitamins. Black currants, pumpkin seeds, broccoli, sage, and nuts. So you keep seeing these overlaps when you're looking at these kind of lists for what helps the brain. Whole grains, oily fish, powerful fruits and berries, some of the nuts and seeds are probably the most common of these. And often you'll see green leafy vegetables and other foods as well. Here's the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. The dietitians had 4 foods they recommend: vegetables, especially cruciferous, berries and cherries, omega-3, and walnuts. And walnuts, of course, is a source of omega-3. So that's, you know, not really a different type of food if you want to get technical. So let's drill into some of these nutrients a little more for nutritional support for the brain. DHA, which is one of the fatty acids you will find in fish oil, or it actually comes from algae. So the fish get it by eating other fish who eat algae. So algae is the actual source, the manufacturer of the omega-3 fatty acids, and it works up the food chain. So it's the main structural component of parts of the brain, including the retina and the cerebral cortex. The eye is actually considered physically part of the brain. And it also isn't needed for sperm and testicles and other parts of the body. The brain is mostly fat, but most of the brain's fat is DHA. So DHA is the most important fat for the brain. So when you're talking about even younger people, this is from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, supplements of DHA can promote enhanced memory and reaction time, even in healthy young people. Young women had improvements in episodic memory. Men had greater improvements, about 20% or more, in reaction time of working memory. And this is following 6 months supplementing with about 1 gram of DHA per day, which you can get nowadays in 1 capsule or 2 capsules if you're going for the stronger DHA products that are on the market. It doesn't take much to get to this level. On traditional fish oil capsules, you're looking at about 8 capsules a day, 9 capsules a day. So there are more concentrated fish oils with more DHA available in the same size fish oil capsule. And also people 55 and older who started having age-related memory complaints, but were not diagnosed with any direct medical issue. They took DHA omega-3 for 6 months, and they cut their reduction of errors in the test of learning and memory skills about in half compared to those who were taking placebo. And the people who took the supplements, they about doubled their levels of DHA in the bloodstream. And the higher their level of DHA, the better their score on this memory and learning skill test. So here's an example of a couple products that people can buy. This is the DHA with EPA. It's what's called a reverse ratio type of product. So it's got 500 milligrams of DHA and 250 milligrams of EPA per capsule. And I point out one of these bullets, a standard fish oil capsule is 120 milligrams DHA and 180 milligrams of EPA. So it's 30% EPA DHA with primarily EPA. And this one's 75% for 1,000 milligrams soft gel of the EPA and DHA, and it's primarily DHA. So you can see you can get over 4 times as much DHA per capsule in a formula like this versus a standard fish oil capsule. And one of our newest products is the DHA 1000. It's 1,000 milligrams of DHA per soft gel. So it's got double the DHA and none of the EPA because this is designed for brain, nerve, eye health, and not so much for cardiovascular health, which is one of the benefits of EPA. Now, another thing that's important for the brain is a category of compounds called neurotransmitters. And if you look at this diagram, you'll see acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that transports messages from one neuron to another. This is the nerve transmission, the nerve impulse. And it's expedited by various compounds that I'm going to talk about. One of them is choline, which is often found in the B complex vitamins. It's also found in the product lecithin that's used in many food products in a small amount as an emulsifier. But a lot of people, including me, use lecithin. I'll put a scoop of that in my smoothie to add some of these nutrients, primarily choline, but also phosphatidylserine, which is also found in lecithin products. And huperzine A is a Chinese club moss extract that maintains acetylcholine levels. So the way that these compounds work, choline is a substance used to make acetylcholine. It actually gets incorporated into the acetylcholine. Huperzine A blocks the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine, so it maintains higher levels of this memory-related neurotransmitter. And phosphatidylserine actually stimulates the release and the production and release of acetylcholine and the transmission of acetylcholine across that barrier. So huperzine A is something that's very readily absorbed and works on that enzyme after it passes the blood-brain barrier, which it does. Many compounds have difficulty passing that barrier, especially many water-soluble compounds. Fats actually can pass through easier because the brain is mostly fat, and fat is not as suspicious of type of material as watery compounds, water-soluble compounds. So in studies, randomized double-blind placebo-controlled studies, we see overall mental health, mental acuity, and mental daily activity scores significantly improved by taking huperzine A over placebo. And phosphatidylserine, one of the components of lecithin, is needed as part of our cell membranes. It's needed for this neuronal communication. And for the electrical impulses in the neurons are actually like an electrical system. So it does enhance the acetylcholine release in brain tissues. So we do offer a product called Brain Regain to support healthy cognitive and neurological function. Some of the main ingredients are ginkgo biloba, the herb, and Rosox from rosemary extract, which are free radical scavengers, as well as phosphatidylserine, glutamine, the amino acid, and choline needed for brain nutrition. So here's what's on the label so you can see what's on there. There are a number of interactions that practitioners should be aware of, and we do express those on the label as well. Basically, 1 to 2 capsules a day provide what's in the supplement facts is 1 capsule a day. So you get that amount or double depending on whether someone takes 1 or 2 a day. And that includes a significant amount of ginkgo, the Rosox, these other compounds. And some people like to use ginkgo alone. 120 milligrams is considered the clinical dose. So if you notice, taking 2 a day of the Brain Regain will actually give you that amount in that formula. But some people like to take the ginkgo separately. Again, it can affect blood pressure and bleeding time and interact with anticoagulants and similar types of medications. But it does have a role in promoting circulation to support brain health, and is also considered a free radical scavenger. And we've supported it in this product with organically grown eleuthero, which a lot of people might be familiar with as the old previously named Siberian ginseng. That it's not a true ginseng, so now it's called eleuthero. So there's actually a significant amount of this, and it's 1 capsule a day, so it's a pretty easy way to take it. Another substance that is not very well known is called PQQ, Pyrolloquinoline Quinone, which is a B vitamin-like enzyme that's been related to coenzyme Q10. So it's used for mitochondrial structures, which is basically the energy factories in our body. So it helps promote energy production, and energy is needed for heart health and cognitive function. What parts of the brain use the most energy on a 24/7 basis is normally the heart, which continuously is beating, hopefully, and the brain, which is continuously operating. Other parts like muscles operate sporadically and not continuously. So this is something that helps not only to maintain the mitochondria where we burn calories and produce energy, both important things that a lot of us want to have, and also help to generate new mitochondria within cells. Mitochondria are called organelles. They're little organisms within the cells that produce energy. And there are more mitochondria in certain cells like brain cells or muscle cells, heart cells, than in other types of cells in the body because they need more energy. So most of the energy we require is produced in the mitochondria by burning calories there. And it helps us burn calories, which most of us need, and again, the brain and heart are very dense with mitochondria to meet their high energy demands. So PQQ is a way to help meet those demands while burning calories. So we actually offer 2 products in this category. The extra strength PQQ has 200 milligrams of alpha lipoic acid added to help its free radical scavenging abilities, but it's a 40 milligram, which is twice the strength of our regular product. And we also have the original regular strength product, which also includes CoQ10, acetyl L-carnitine. The acetyl group in there also helps with forming acetylcholine in the brain. And it has the brain and nerve form of B12 called methylcobalamin. It's not so much the energetic form, which is the dibencoxide or dinosylcobalamin, which is used in the energy pathway. This is the pathway of B12 that supports brain and nerve health. So we're helping with signaling related to energy production. That's the purpose of this. And the carnitine itself is a way to channel the long chain fatty acids into mitochondria, which is a way of supplying them with fuel to burn. So if you want to burn fats, carnitine is a way to do that. Acetyl L-carnitine gets it in the brain because the acetyl group is needed to make acetylcholine, as I mentioned. Then we have a product, this is one I use myself, Protosorb Magnesium. It's Magtine Magnesium L-threonate, developed by researchers at MIT, a patented, very soluble, bioavailable form of magnesium. And it specifically is the best form of magnesium to get to the brain and the nervous system. Why do we need magnesium in the brain and the nervous system? It helps regulate the density of the neuronal synapse, of the nerve ends and the way they operate, sending signals across the gap. It is necessary to stabilize and help these neuronal connections adapt to stresses. So this form, which is technically a magnesium salt of L-threonic acid, magnesium threonate, with the trademark name Magtine, can cross the blood-brain barrier. It increases magnesium in the central nervous system and makes the synapses more plastic or more adaptable, would be a common way to put that, to preserve normal cognitive function. The bioavailability of magnesium L-threonate is higher than other common forms like magnesium chloride, magnesium citrate, magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate, magnesium gluconate. And as we see in this graph, the elevation of magnesium in the cerebral spinal fluid, so after it passes the blood-brain barrier, the concentration of this form of magnesium is higher than the other forms that were tested. Only Magtine was shown to have a significant effect on raising magnesium concentration in the cerebral spinal fluid versus the other forms. So here's an example, a 12-week randomized double-blind placebo-controlled human clinical study looked at cognitive ability of people using Magtine and significant improvements observed in various domains. The composite score shows versus placebo, not only significant at 6 weeks, highly significant results in a 12-week period. So looking at executive function, working memory, attention, and episodic memory, all 4 areas showed significant improvement using Magtine over placebo. And in the trail making test and executive function test, there was a 10% improvement using Magtine, equivalent to a 9-year reduction in apparent brain age over a 12-week course of supplementation. And it also reduced stress and tension in the group taking the Magtine. Magnesium, it has a calming effect. Now, curcumin is something many people are familiar with, but there's some issues that many people are not familiar with. One is its poor bioavailability in certain forms, and the way that it affects balanced immune and brain function. So immune and its effect on joints and things like that, joints and muscles, are fairly well known, but not so much the effect on the brain. So what's important to notice, oral administration of concentrated curcuminoid extract, the 95% curcuminoid products, even at high doses of 8 grams, which is about 16 capsules, resulted in no detectable serum curcumin levels. In other words, they couldn't find it when they were looking in the serum. And when they went to 10 to 12 grams a day, they found very low levels. And the reason why is that curcumin, which is extracted from the spice, the herb turmeric, is very well absorbed in turmeric. It is not a crystalline structure. It's what's called an amorphous structure. It is in a water-soluble matrix in turmeric. If you put turmeric in a juicer and drink the juice, you're going to absorb a good amount of curcumin. When you extract it, you have ruined that matrix. You have turned it from a soluble product that's bioavailable into an insoluble crystalline material that is insoluble. And because of that, many companies resort to various strategies to try to resolubilize the crystalline 95% curcuminoid material and make it absorbable again like it was in the original plant material. So they convert it to a different form. They're using natural or synthetic materials to do so. They're using fat-soluble or water-soluble materials to do so. And there are different repercussions depending on what they're using. So one consideration is that it is free curcumin that is the desirable active form in the human body. The curcumin that is attached to something else is often not going to have any effect on the body, even if it shows to be well absorbed. And I've seen some very well absorbed curcumin extracts that have no effect on inflammatory markers, for example. And if you think, why is someone taking a curcumin product? And are you going to take a curcumin product that you have very high blood levels of curcumin, but it doesn't affect your immune markers and other things that you're looking for benefits? Is that really a product that's going to give you a benefit? In other words, are you looking for absorption? Or are you looking for what happens after absorption? And I think the latter is more important, that consumers and practitioners are looking for benefits and health effects and not simply bioavailability, which in some cases you can force, but end up with the curcumin circulating in great amounts that isn't doing much for the body. And that's unfortunate, I think, that people are putting out those kind of products. So one product that we do have and recommend is the Longvita Optimized Curcumin. This was developed at UCLA by researchers and is trademarked and patented by those researchers. And it provides cognitive support, and you get the free curcumin circulating, not these metabolized forms that are inactive. So this diagram kind of shows you what's going on. They produce what they call a solid lipid curcumin particle, a fairly solid sphere, which is similar to what happens to most fats during digestion, where they form liposomes. So it's a fat-soluble matrix. It is released at the optimal point in the digestive tract to absorb the curcumin, and you end up with free curcumin circulating, where it can go through the bloodstream. It can pass the blood-brain barrier, which these conjugated or these materials that are attached to other compounds cannot pass the blood-brain barrier. And so it has potential benefits for the brain. So even at less actual curcumin, because it's bonded to these other materials, so at 1/3 the dose of actual curcumin, it's 22% better absorbed, which is about a 65 times better bioavailability versus 95% curcuminoids, the standard extracts. So we could see healthy human subjects, oral administration of this material. It's only about 1/3 curcumin, but they're getting a significant improvement over even a much stronger, more concentrated form of curcumin. And the plasma half-life of the Longvita material is higher. You're getting about a 7-hour half-life versus about a 1 to 2 hour half-life on normal curcumins after they're absorbed. And the red on this graph is glucuronidated. What does that mean? That means the liver has already processed and detoxified and made this curcuminoid inactive. It has basically converted this into a form that can be safely excreted without having any effects, including benefits. And that's the problem. If the body metabolizes it too quickly and gets rid of it, and it's no longer in the active form, it's not going to have any benefits. So the white column, the free curcumin, is the one with all the benefits in the body. So we're seeing the fraction of free curcumin in plasma significantly higher, and the free curcumin is the one that's going to pass the blood-brain barrier. The glucuronidated one, the one that the liver has inactivated, cannot possibly pass the blood-brain barrier. It's not going to have any brain benefits. So this technology allows free curcumin to penetrate the blood-brain barrier. It can protect brain tissue from free radical attack. It can support healthy, normal cognitive function. And it can reduce the level of beta amyloid protein in healthy adults. Beta amyloid protein is considered a potentially harmful material if it can be utilized to make other compounds and other tissues that are unhealthy. So controlling the level of beta amyloid protein is a normal competence of the brain and its immune system. Longvita does that better than placebo. And in fact, there's over a dozen studies showing significant improvement in working memory and attention, taking 1 or 2 capsules a day for a 30-day period. So it's a reasonable strategy. In a 12-week period, better working memory, better pattern separation, lower fatigue scores for the brain, lower tension, anger, confusion, and mood disturbance within 4 weeks. So another category to talk about is amino acids. L-tryptophan is an essential amino acid. We must consume it in the diet. There are some quality issues for the fermented material. First of all, it's got to be made by non-GMO organisms. There was a problem many years ago with a batch that was made using genetically modified organisms that started apparently mutating and producing a lot of toxins. And so we're looking for the toxins, we're looking for the microcontamination, but we're insisting on non-GMO organisms as the fermenters. It's a precursor of serotonin, a neurotransmitter, and melatonin, a hormone. And these are substances that regulate mood, stress response, they encourage positive mood, restful sleep, and they help regulate appetite and sleep patterns. So we've actually got 3 different tryptophan products available, 500 milligram and 1000 milligram. But an alternative is the 5-HTP, 5-hydroxytryptophan. Some of the tryptophan that we consume in the diet, I've seen various numbers. One that I might cite is roughly 10% of dietary tryptophan may go into this pathway and convert to 5-HTP. And 5-HTP then can convert into serotonin. That's your pathway to make serotonin. Serotonin, of course, can also convert into melatonin. 5-HTP is extracted from a bean, so it's a plant-based material, and serotonin is the transmitter that helps with positive mood and relaxation. 5-HTP will cross the blood-brain barrier, which tryptophan will not. So it's a substrate for the production of melatonin, but it helps maintain healthy serotonin levels, which affects many people's mood. That's an essential component of the way our body balances stresses and helps with create a positive mood. So this is our label on there. We include some niacinamide, some B3, and some B6, which are related substances. B6 helps you create these metabolites. For example, converting 5-HTP into serotonin requires some B6. Niacinamide spares tryptophan. So it helps create a bigger pool of tryptophan in the body to convert into 5-HTP. Glycine and taurine are relaxing neurotransmitters. Inositol also has a role in that tryptophan niacin pathway. So is considered relaxing as well. Inositol is another nutrient you'll find in lecithin, by the way. Another amino acid related to this is GABA. It's a non-protein amino acid that's a neurotransmitter in the brain. It will cross the blood-brain barrier with the help of phospholipids, the compounds that are in lecithin, and lecithin is in most fats. It's called the brain's own calming agent. It's naturally produced in the body. In fact, vast amounts of GABA can be produced by healthy probiotics in the human gut. And the vagus nerve can transmit those impulses from the gut to the brain, actually sharing that information. So it regulates the brain and nerve activity by inhibiting the number of neurons firing. So there's not too much going on there, and it's an appropriate amount. It regulates intercellular communication and cognition as well. And another neurotransmitter is the L-DOPA. It's another bean extract, velvet bean, which is an Ayurvedic plant, contains no less than 15% naturally occurring L-DOPA. You'll also find L-DOPA in fava beans and certain other beans as well. And L-DOPA is the precursor of dopamine, which is another neurotransmitter that's a feel-good neurotransmitter. It's actually been likened to chocolate. The effect of chocolate has been compared to the effect of dopamine in the body as having a feel-good effect. L-DOPA can penetrate the blood-brain barrier where it can be metabolized into dopamine. And dopamine can also produce epinephrine and norepinephrine. So it's a way to help with mood regulation, positive mood feeling, increased dopamine release in the brain, and working memory and attention. So dopamine has a wide range of actions in the human body. And it is well absorbed. You can see by this chart, this is a study that was done by protocol. A single oral ingestion has a peak in less than an hour after dosing. And it's also used to make many enzymes and bioactive substances. And converting L-DOPA to dopamine happens not only in the brain, but it can happen in the stomach, in the intestinal mucosa, and in the liver. So this is something that can be produced other places, but only will cross the blood-brain barrier as L-DOPA. Now, it is not recommended for women who are potentially pregnant or breastfeeding. It can interact with certain medications, so use the cautions that are on the label, please. L-theanine is another amino acid found in green tea. It does cross the blood-brain barrier. It helps with healthy alpha wave brain activity, which is related to relaxed, alert brain states. It supports brain cells exposed to excitatory neurotransmitters like aspartic acid or some of the other ones that tend to excite the nerves, whereas things like theanine or GABA tend to relax the nervous impulses. And it does promote normal dopamine and GABA release as well. So theanine has kind of a balancing effect on these. And it's one of the reasons why people who drink green tea, which has about a third as much caffeine as a cup of coffee, do not get the same side effects from the caffeine in general as people who are drinking coffee. People who drink coffee have more side effects, even if you equalize the caffeine dose. And that's been attributed to the presence of L-theanine in green tea. It's also a free radical fighter that helps with healthy cardiovascular function. We've supported it with 100 milligrams of inositol, which is the form myo-inositol, and that is used for again, it has effects on the serotonin pathway. And taurine, this is one that I personally use as well. It's essential for some purposes. It's used to make bile acid, which is a digestive material that's in the gallbladder for fat digestion. It's used to maintain fluid balance. It's been called a sodium pump activator to help maintain the appropriate osmotic pressure between in cells and out of cells. Helps regulate calcium concentration in the cells. It's not used to make protein though. And there is no L-taurine, it's just taurine. There are not different forms of it like there are on some of the more complex amino acids. But taurine is best known for its effect on mood and nerves. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. You need it for neurotransmitting. You need it for muscular and cardiovascular function, and it's needed for vision. Taurine is used in the eyes, which again are considered part of the brain physically. Now, melatonin is a potent free radical scavenger. Melatonin, as I mentioned earlier, is made from serotonin, which is made from 5-HTP. Most of the serotonin and melatonin made in the body is made in the GI tract. And it helps regulate sleep-wake cycles, not only for the whole body, but for specific areas of the body. One of its most important uses is supporting healthy sleep patterns, traveling across time zones and shift workers, for example. But it also helps regulate the immune system, and it helps maintain healthy gastrointestinal lining. That cycling of when things happen that is controlled by melatonin at night, offsetting the adrenal hormones during the day, is a way to cycle whether we have more exciting and more physically active things going on, or whether we have more sedate and it's time for relax repair. It's kind of like if you have a road crew fixing a highway at night when the traffic's light versus trying to close it during the day when the traffic is heavy and causing massive traffic jams. Melatonin is that traffic controller of when things are happening in the repair cycle in the body. There are some cautions. Melatonin is not intended for long-term use, typically 4 weeks. It can cause drowsiness. Again, high doses especially, there's a caution if you're pregnant or nursing. And because it has a relaxing effect, it can affect immunosuppressants. It can affect other medical conditions, especially autoimmune. And it can interact with supplements such as St. John's wort and 5-HTP that have effects on related neurotransmitter systems. So we actually have 3 products for melatonin from Protocol for Life Balance. We have the 3 milligram lozenge with B6. We have the 10 milligram capsules, and the latest, the 20 milligram capsules. And last thing I have to share with you today, vitamin D. And people are not necessarily familiar with it as a mood support and brain support nutrient, but it does have a role. The common foods it comes from are, except for fortified foods and animal foods, are fairly rare. And sunlight is another option. Signs of vitamin D deficiency, according to Cleveland Clinic, include bone loss, muscle cramps or muscle weakness, bone and joint pain, especially in the back, fatigue, but also mood changes. So in adults, vitamin D deficiency isn't obvious, but some of these symptoms, which might have multiple causes, admittedly, but possibly vitamin D deficiency. Have you had the vitamin D tested, or are you testing it, if you're a practitioner, in your patients? Now, this is a graphic from the Vitamin D Council, and it shows you how you can make vitamin D from the sunlight and how it's limited. And using an example, the second row from the top, and we're looking at a line going from about New York to maybe Portland, Oregon. And at that latitude, you you can make vitamin D at different times of the year, but not all year. The darker reddish ones, you can make vitamin D in about 10 minutes if it's most of the body exposed to the sun without sunscreen. On the orange ones, it'll take about 20 minutes, about twice as long. And the white circles, the clear circles, really, you can't make vitamin D. There's insufficient sunlight. And something that's very important that very few people know, look at the right, the shadow rule. If your shadow is longer than you are tall, you cannot make vitamin D. It doesn't matter if you're looking at the chart and it's the middle of summer. If you go out and your shadow is longer than your height, the sun is too low in the sky, too much of the ultraviolet B rays are filtered by the atmosphere before it reaches you, and your skin cannot make vitamin D. The other thing is that it might take several times as long with darker pigments of the skin. So darker skin pigment will block vitamin D production in the skin, and it takes longer to penetrate that pigment. And that's one of the reasons why we tend to tan and even burn if we're exposed to the sunlight for longer periods, because that's part of our self-protection mechanism against making too much vitamin D and having toxic levels of vitamin D. It's almost impossible to get vitamin D toxicity from sunlight because of that self-correcting mechanism. But next time you're out in the sun, look at your shadow. If you're, let's say, 6 feet tall and your shadow is 5 feet long, you can make vitamin D. If you're 6 feet tall and your shadow is 7 feet long, you can't make vitamin D. No matter what, if it's noon, no matter what time of day it is, there's not enough solar energy to make vitamin D unless the sun is high enough in the sky that your shadow is shorter than how tall you are. The shadow rule. You probably never forget this. If you never heard it before, this is probably something you'll always remember. So we do have a variety of vitamin D. The clinical potency, the 50,000, is designed for once a week use, which is a little over 7,000 units a day. Clinically speaking, 10,000 units a day is considered safe for just about everyone. The upper limit in the United States is 4,000, but there's a huge safety margin built in. The evidence says that that upper limit could be 10,000 without adding risk to the population. So taking 7,000 a day is considered okay, safe, in other words. And sometimes higher levels are recommended to raise low serum levels. Vitamin D are typically smaller capsules, or you're taking it by the drops, so it's an easy way to administer it. So there's a variety of vitamin D available, but don't forget your vitamin D, especially during the winter months, when in the United States, especially the northern United States, it's going to be impossible to make vitamin D. I know in Chicago, where I live, between late September and late March, we can't make any vitamins D here. It's impossible. There's not enough solar angle. The sun's too low in the sky. So depending on where you are in the country and the world, you may or may not be able to make vitamin D during this time period. So that concludes my presentation on nutritional support for brain and mood, featuring Protocol for Life Balance products. And I'd like to thank Evolving Nutrition for inviting me to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge, Neil. We couldn't have done it without you. And we thank our lucky stars every day that Kim brought you on to help us out. So thank you very, very much, sir.
All right. Glad to help, and hope you all have a healthy holiday season. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Bye.